with the new base
Okay.
point. So that's what I wanted to research, the impact of that and
Right.
everything. Yeah.
You wrote in English. What
Yeah.
was the reason behind that? We have David with me. Hi, David. How are you?
Hi, Pandy. I am doing well. Thank you for asking.
Thank you for saying yes to my invitation.
Of course.
David was my student for thesis or Skripsi. David was one of not many actually student who wrote Skripsi in English, right, David?
English. That's right, Pandy.
Tell us what is the topic of your Skripsi?
The topic for my thesis is the delimitation of the maritime boundaries between Indonesia and Malaysia, specifically of the EEZ or the Exclusive Economic Zone in the South China Sea. But what's
Right.
different from my research with other research regarding this topic is that in
Mm,
2022,
right.
The Malaysian government just happened to release a new
Right.
base point. Yeah, and thus, because of this new base point, all of the
Mm,
prior research regarding the EEZ boundaries between Indonesia and Malaysia could be rather different with the new base
okay.
point. So that's what I wanted to research, the impact of that and
Right.
everything. Yeah.
You wrote in English. What
Yeah.
was the reason behind that?
Because personally, by
Mm,
myself, I've been speaking English for a very long time, like
mm.
since I was 6 years old, maybe,
All
because
right.
my parents never allowed me to watch Indonesian media, like TV shows and movie. They only allowed me to watch English movies and TV shows.
All right.
So that's how I got used to reading and watching English. And so personally
Mm,
myself, if I have to do like a big presentation where I have to talk a
mm.
lot, I am just more comfortable in English.
Did you study overseas?
No, but my dad did. I've lived in Indonesia, yeah.
So basically, you started to learn English in Indonesia.
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Okay, I was about to ask you actually what was the challenges writing English,
Mm.
but basically because your English is probably better than your formal Indonesian, right?
Yeah, I guess you could say that, yeah.
So and it was good, right? So your nilai was also good, I guess.
Thankfully so, yeah. It was pretty good.
All right. Is there any like interesting experience while you're writing the thesis, especially because you're writing?
Interesting experience.
Mm,
Maybe it was quite challenging, I guess, to
mm,
me
mm.
personally, because there weren't a lot of research that used Malaysia's new base point. Right? Because at that point where I started my research, this base point
Right.
was very new. It was
Okay.
very recent, it was very new. So I had to explore a lot about the differences between the old
Right.
base point of Malaysia and the new base point in Malaysia and how it
Mm,
differed, right?
right.
And whether or not it is something that is
Mm,
unique to a country, if
right.
they where their changing base point is new or not, or something like so. There was a lot of exploration, I guess you could say,
Mm,
for
uh,
regarding the research. Yeah.
okay. Now, last question before you present. Any bad experience with supervision? You can say bad things about me now because you're graduated.
Revisions, probably the difficulty
Mm.
of contacting you sometimes, Mandy, because
Oh,
yeah, you are a very busy person, and same goes with the a few of my friends who's also your bimbingan students, right?
right.
Uh, yeah, especially since know, this week you might be in China, the next week you might be Australia. Like it was
Right.
very, very difficult to reach you out. But other than that, it was very, very enlightening, and you only
Right.
helped make my thesis much easier than it could have been. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. So, hi everyone. This is the title of my and the topic of my thesis: the delimitation of the maritime boundaries of the Indonesia-Malaysia Exclusive Economic Zone in the South China Sea when we consider the 2022 Malaysian base point. As I mentioned before, India and Malaysia have agreed to a border agreement, but strictly only the continental shelf in the South China Sea, and they have not yet finished negotiations regarding the EEZ. And that's what we want to talk about, especially on the third point of background. On the 30th of June, 2022, Malaysia
Mm,
declared a new baseline, which consists of 100 points, where the baseline is completely different from the baseline used by Malaysia when they prior discussed the negotiations. And this is the difference. As you can see on the left here is Malaysia's prior baseline, which is a normal baseline that is attached to Malaysia's coastline. As you can see, what changed is they now use a straight baseline. As you can see, there's a significant difference now between the baseline that is edging closer towards Indonesia's baseline. And that's what I wanted to discuss.
Mm.
So the objective of this research, of course, is to first to analyze the overlap of EEZ borders, right, between Indonesia and Malaysia when we consider this new base point. And second is to simulate and see just how many different gun lines I could perform when we take into
Mm.
account Malaysia's 2022 baseline. And third is whether or not it is equitable, right, the new base points, because that is the main objective of a border, right, maritime borders, which is equitable.
Yeah.
Now, the method, of course, this is the location, South China Sea between Indonesia and Malaysia, and a few different kinds of materials. The main base map I'm using is this one, which is the British Admiralty chart 4508,
Mm.
as well as Petline for 2017. And there's the procedures, right, of my research preparation, georeferencing, of course, using the maps, data processing, which consists of three different steps, which is visualizing baseline, simulating overlap as well as Voronoi diagram, result
Mm.
analysis, and map making. And we go straight into the results and discussion. So
Right.
this is the result of my the overlap simulation that I've done. And as you can see here, it's really, really interesting is that after Malaysia used a different baseline, right, from normal to
Mm.
straight, the number or the area, the total area of EEZ between Indonesia and Malaysia actually decreased, right? Indonesia has 17,000 kilometers square less EEZ area, while Malaysia has 534,000, no, 15,000 less
Mm.
area, where the overlap also decreased by
Mm.
13,000 kilometers square. Now, how does this impact a lot of things will be discussed later on, right? This is just
Right.
strictly by numbers. There's a lot less overlap and as well as a lot less easy area for both countries with Malaysia using this new system. And this is the analysis, right, that
Yeah.
I've already previously mentioned. These are disabled the numbers as well. And during my research, Andy and I discussed a few possible maritime limitation options between Indonesia and Malaysia regarding this current situation, which is the new baseline, right? So first option is we would
Mm.
like to analyze Indonesia's unilateral claim that is depicted in Peta and Kara 2017, right? Just to
Right.
see where exactly is the baseline that Indonesia wants, right? And how different it is from the rest. And then option two is where we use all of Malaysia's small islands
Mm.
where they are considered to have a full effect. And this is where Malaysia is a normal baseline. And just another reminder, normal baseline is where the baseline
Mm.
is attached to the coastline. And
Right.
Indonesia, of course, uses archipelagic baseline. This is based on a prior IGA case, which is Qatar and Bahrain. Option
Right.
three is Indonesia's archipelagic baseline and Malaysia's normal baseline again. However, this time, Malaysia's small islands are given a nil effect, where the islands do not directly contribute towards EEZ boundary.
Mm.
This is based on Nicaragua versus Honduras from previous ICJs. And option four is, of course, where we use Malaysia's straight baseline that we talked about previously.
Right.
And so this is one of the median line construction here, which is
Mm.
option four, which is again where Malaysia uses Malaysia uses the straight baseline.
Mm.
And as you can see here, this is the constructed boundary line that I have created. And this gray square here is the Voronoi diagram, which is the diagram what I use to create a median line or an equidistant line, you can say, from the base points of both countries.
Mm.
Yeah. And these are the relevant factors. Here we can compare the area of EEZ as well as the relevant coast of the both countries as well. And this is how we compare on whether or not the
Mm.
resulting boundary line is equitable or not. As you can
Right.
see here, Indonesia has a total area of 143,000 kilometers square, while
Mm.
Malaysia has a total of 165,873 kilometers square. With the
Okay.
relevant coast is Indonesia having 944,000 kilometers and Malaysia has 1,045 kilometers. And remember, uh, this is the table for relevant coast, right? Option one,
Mm.
two, three, four. And what's interesting here is that every single one,
Mm.
or Indonesia has a shorter relevant coast, right? Malaysia
Oh.
has a longer relevant coast. And another interesting is that once Malaysia changes into a straight baseline, the length
Mm.
of their coast significantly decreases by more than 400 kilometers, right? And then this is the relevant area. Again, Indonesia has less relevant area than Malaysia. And then the rules in UNCLOS to dictate equitability is that the country with the shorter relevant coast
Mm.
has to have a smaller relevant area.
Right.
That way, the boundary line can be considered as equitable. As you can see here, Indonesia with less relevant coast indeed has less relevant area, and so because
Mm.
of from the sheer numbers
Right.
perspective, the boundary lines for all four options are actually equitable for both countries.
Okay.
And the map results. This is the one for option four, where Malaysia uses a straight baseline. So yeah, again, this is just the analysis that I've already mentioned before. Malaysia has a long relevant coast, so it's entitled to a larger relevant area. And none of the ratios above here from option one to option four actually exceed 1/2. So this is really,
Okay.
really, really equitable, right?
Mm.
Because a study of previous cases in Romania versus Ukraine case in 2009, the ratio of relevant coastal area 1/2.8 and 1/2.1. And even in
Right.
Nicaragua versus Colombia in 2012, there's a ratio of 1/8.2
Mm.
for the relevant area. So for every 1 kilometer square for Nicaragua is 8 kilometers square for the EEZ for Colombia. And that is considered fair. And
Mm.
thus, with the ratios between these two countries not exceeding 1/2, it can be said just from the sheer numbers, again, that all of the delimitation options can be categorized as equitable.
Right.
And then, of course, this is strictly just talking about the numbers between Indonesia and Malaysia, right?
Mm.
When we consider the relevant coast relevant area. However, of course, we have to consider again the impacts of Malaysia
Mm.
unilaterally changing their baseline, right? Because
Mm.
this was not a multilateral decision. In Malaysia, completely changed their baseline by their own choice. Now, this is
Mm.
what needs to be analyzed further on to determine whether or not the baseline is actually uh, fair or not.
Right.
But based on my research, no matter what baseline Malaysia or Indonesia uses,
Mm.
the relevant area and relevant coast will be considered as equitable. Analysis, as you can see here, the overlap right between Indonesia and Malaysia, and the four maritime limitations options are option one are where we use Indonesia's unilateral claim. Option two is where
Mm.
we use small effect from Malaysia's small islands. Option three is where Malaysia's small islands are given a nil effect. Option four is where Indonesia uses like baseline and Malaysia uses 22 straight baseline. And the resulting maritime option result. Option one and two are equitable.
Mm.
Option three, where it's technically equitable, but we use an extreme baseline, right? And option four, we don't know yet whether it's equitable or not because we need to
Mm.
further analyze the use of Malaysia's straight baseline.
Thank you very much, David. Very good. Very interesting. I always have these questions to my
Mhm.
student. We are engineers, right? We usually look
Yes.
at the numbers and we talk
Mhm.
about ratio. I
Yeah.
understand that you actually compared the length of the baseline for
Coast.
Indonesia and
Yeah.
for Malaysia. And the ratio of this comparison will be used to consider or to evaluate whether or not
Yeah.
the result is vegetable by comparing that uh, coastal length ratio and relevant area ratio.
Yes.
So, because I know that you showed us even when the difference is really, really big, like from
Hmm.
1.1 to something to 1 to 8, for example,
Yeah.
still it is considered as equitable, right?
Equitable. Yeah.
Can you tell me your experience there? Like as an engineer, we
Hmm.
usually stick to that numbers, right? So what is your feeling and how do you judge that? Don't you think? Because I was quite surprised actually at the beginning when I learned about this. Kok bisa ya?
Hmm.
Something like this is equitable. So do you have any question to yourself when you analyze that kind of case?
Of course, Pandy, because as previously mentioned, right, in a previous ICJ case, ada yang 1/8 itu
Yeah,
considered equitable. Tapi ada
right.
juga in a previous case yang 1/2, 1/3 nggak equitable juga gitu.
Right.
There are also cases like that. So
Right.
as an engineer, personally, that is very confusing to me because as you said, we see the numbers, right? And based on these
Right.
numbers, like between Indonesia and Malaysia, for every 1 kilometer Indonesia has for a
Mm.
coast or for a
Right.
baseline, Malaysia has 1.2.
Okay.
That seems fair, right? Based on the numbers,
Right.
because they just have a longer coastline.
Uh-huh.
But it might also be considered not fair because, all of the economic considerations,
All
the
right. Right.
political considerations, and all the blah, 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 which I don't study, so I don't really understand.
Yeah.
So yeah, when I was doing my research, I said, okay, I'm just gonna focus on this part because this is what I understand. And
Right.
if anyone wants to use my research for further analysis, go ahead. I hope
Right.
you can use my research for a good reason. Yeah.
Yeah. So one thing that you mentioned, I like it. You conclude into something simpler, like a coastal state has longer baseline or coastline. It is acceptable. The state will have large
Larger. Yeah.
maritime areas. That's basically, I think, is something that we can conclude from different result of the cases, right? So I think people who watch this will need to learn that this is based on legal
Yeah.
basically, you know, legal aspects, right? So if you talk about maritime boundary delimitation, it is not purely technical. So of course we can draw
Yep.
line, we can calculate this, we can, compute this and that. We have numbers, but at the end of the day, this is also about legal. So we cannot really ignore that. So just like what David
Yeah.
David did, even though technically speaking, it was a bit, it raised question actually, right, in our mind,
Yeah.
but as long as the legal provision allows it, and then we just trust it, basically, right? So what
Yeah.
we, if you really do a thesis on this topic, so what you need to do is first, you need to refer to the legal provision first. First, UNCLOS, and then the second is like what David did. Basically, you consult with the jurisprudence or decision
Yeah.
already made by the court, and then you
Previous
utilize
cases.
that as, yeah, previous cases basically. So don't only rely on technical aspects. All right, David. Do you have anything to say, or you want to demonstrate now the process, the demonstration?
I think yeah, I can go straight to demonstration part. So hi again, everyone. I'm going to do a basic demonstration here on what exactly I did to process and analyze the data I received during my research, right? So first things first is the main software I use is of course
Mm.
QGIS, right? QGIS,
Okay.
because it is a free open source software. So it's very accessible and very simple to use in my opinion. I'm going to go straight into it. So first of all, you your QGIS, right? QGIS and you make a new project. I get a base map, which is this OSM, right?
Okay.
This just makes it easier for you to process your data basically because you have at least a base map behind you right now. The first thing you have to do though, to maritime delimitation is of course the
Mm.
coordinates, right? That's probably the most important thing, the coordinates of the baseline. Now, where you get it from is actually here. There you go. So what you do is you go to UN here, right? You go
Mhm.
to un.org, departments,
Mm.
and then you look at the LOS is law of the sea, right?
Right.
When you go to UN Law of the Sea, you can then choose a country. And of course, I first want to find the Indonesian base points, right? Baseline. So we go here, list of geographic coordinates of points.
Mm.
And now that I've done that, see, there is the coordinates of every single baseline and base point that I need
Mm.
that belongs to Indonesia. And then we can do the same to Malaysia, right?
Right.
You just find Malaysia right here. And then we
Mm.
do the exact same thing, list of geographic coordinates of points. There you go.
Mm.
With all of these points, as you can see here, list of coordinates. If you see as well in the same page, it actually has all of the negotiations and uh, all of the boundary lines that Malaysia has done with other countries. As you can see here, maritime boundary delimitation agreements with Indonesia. We have the continental shelf with Thailand, with Singapore as well. So this is a very useful database for anyone that wants to learn more about maritime delimitation, right? And so you take these coordinates, right, from Malaysia, and then you just put them into a Google Sheet,
Mm.
or an Excel, and then you import
Right.
it into a CSV as seen like so, right? When you have already made the CSV, you just add them, right? Delimited text layer,
Mm.
geographical coordinates. This is the data I use for my thesis, right? So
Right.
just to make it easier, do that. And then you can see here, these are all the coordinates of
Okay.
Malaysia's base points, right? 100.
The
I need,
coordinate is in decimal, right?
yes, decimal, yes.
Okay.
You have to convert it first from the
Right.
website because it uses DMS, right? Degree, minute, and second.
Right.
And in your Excel sheet or your Google sheet, and then you make sure you get the right field, right, for the X value and the Y value,
Mm.
like so. And then you just add data. There it is. These are
Mm.
the points. These are the geographical base points for Malaysia, right?
Right.
And then because it's in points, what we need now is a line, right? So just go to
Okay.
processing toolbox here, and we go points to path. Okay, so then
Mm.
we make sure it's the right layer, right?
Okay.
And then just run it. You can make the name, of course, for example, like Malaysia baseline, like so.
Mm.
Run. Oh, I need to make a save file. That's complete. You can go Malaysia baseline,
Yeah.
save, run it. You can see there's Malaysia baseline right there. It
Mm.
follows the points that we created as a
Right.
path. So of course, there's a bit of an error there, right? So all we have to do is
Right.
edit it by toggle editing.
Mm.
Right, wait, let's make this. There
Mm.
you go. We toggle editing, right?
Okay.
Because this line does not exist, right? Because
Right.
Malaysia is unique as a country because it's has two areas.
Yeah.
So it's the north of Borneo and this one, right? So we have to edit it. We just have to use this button right here, split features.
Mm-hmm.
So we just have to click that line, boom, and then we do the exact same thing on this one,
Okay.
like so. And now we could safely delete this
Mm.
line. And then we have to do the same with this one. Remember, because this is
Sure.
Brunei. This line does not
Okay.
exist either.
Okay.
And so we have to delete it as well.
Mm.
Delete this one. There you go. So now we can
Okay.
delete this as well. Uh, since
All
I
right.
imported all of Malaysia's base points, right?
Mm.
And then you do the exact same thing with Indonesia's baseline,
Okay.
right? So there you go. There's Indonesia's baseline. You do
Right.
just the exact same thing. You import the points, you make it into a line, you edit it, and so on. Now,
Mm.
next, what you have to do is you have to consider, remember, the area of delimitation for my particular research is the South China Sea,
Right.
right? South China Sea here. Therefore, because we are strictly doing the maritime in South China Sea, there is no need for us to keep these points right here, right? Because these points are not going to contribute towards maritime limitation in South China Sea, right? So we can safely delete them. But to make sure you know exactly what you want to delete, you can
Mm.
also do this. Remember that maritime delimitation
Mm.
has a maximum distance for each boundary line, right? So for example, here, we're doing the EEZ boundary. So an EEZ has a maximum distance of 200 nautical miles from the country's baseline. So we can take this this tool right here, measure. We can change this unit to a nautical mile, right? And now, if we are to see, for example, these points, we don't exactly
Yeah.
know if these points will contribute towards the South China Sea, which is here. So what we can do is that we take this tool, the measuring tool, we take this
Mm-hmm.
point, we click on it, and then we pull it all the way to Indonesia's spaceport, right? So as you can see here, there, look at that. It has
Mm-hmm.
500 nautical miles, right?
Right.
And so even if we take EEZ from both points, they will never overlap because it's more than 400 nautical miles. And
Yeah.
so we can safely assume this point right here will never contribute towards an easy delimitation between Indonesia and Malaysia in the South China Sea. And so if this is, so we can then go for this point. Okay, no, 500, 500. So now we can safely assume only this point will contribute because this has, no, even this won't contribute, right? It's more than 400. So we can
Right.
safely delete these points right here just so it won't clutter up during when we make a baseline, right? Because making a baseline requires a lot of computer processing power, and the more data we use, the it might ruin your laptop or your computer, right? So then you can just delete this because it will never contribute, right? Same goes for this
Right.
area, South China Sea, and then we can use a ruler. But for this one, because we have these lines right here, we can also safely assume these ones won't contribute, right? Because these ones will make an easy on this area, right? So it
Right.
won't go to the right because there are these lines. So we can just delete this one. Then this is Singapore, right? Since Singapore is here as well, it won't contribute either. So we can just do this one. Since Indonesia's base point starts from here, we can go there and we can delete it. There you go.
Right.
So see, now we have these two base points, Indonesian base point and Malaysian base point, right? And now we can try to do the maritime delimitation. So first thing you have to do is, of course, with maritime delimitation, we don't just need baseline, we need base points, right? So we already have these two lines right here, right? Malaysia baseline and Indonesia baseline. So now we just go to another feature in the processing toolbox called this one, random points on lines. So these basically make points all along these lines right here.
All right.
So we go like this one, Indonesia baseline. Well, let's say we make 100 points, which 0.1 distance. There you go. So you can see now there are points
All
along
right.
these lines, right?
Okay.
And we can do the exact same thing for the Malaysian baseline. And we go, points along these lines.
Right.
There you go. See, now we have these 2 points. We have points along the baseline that we just edited, right? So it doesn't
Right.
clutter up again. It doesn't clutter up all points all along these lines. It doesn't make points all along these lines like that, right? That's why I edited them to make things easier for my computer and for you, the operator who is doing this research. Now that we have these points, of course, we use the tool that I previously mentioned, which is the Voronoi polygons. Now, the purpose of these polygons is basically they make an equidistant line from each point data set, right? So what we have to do is we have to first merge these 2 points that we have, right? Because it uses one single point data set. So we go merge vector layers, as seen so, or you can just search it, right? Merge vector layers. And then you input both the points, Indonesia points and Malaysia points. And then you merge them. And like so, right? So now these 2 points are merged, right? They're one color. And now we can go here, there, right? The tab above, go geometry. We go like this, Voronoi polygons. This is the tool that we're going to use.
Okay.
Right? You take the merged line and then you just run it. And this is what's created. This is the Voronoi polygon, similar to what I showed you earlier, right? In my resulting map, in my presentation. And you pulled it a little bit down. As you can see here, these are Malaysia's baseline, and these are Indonesia's baseline. So you just follow the line that's in between them. And that is the equidistant line. So from these points, as you can see, it goes here all the way up. This is the equidistant line. There you go. And similar with this one,
Right.
between Indonesia and Malaysia. This is Malaysia's base point, right? So it goes from here to there, all the way up there to there. So, and then you can extract these lines, right? Then this will be the result. There you go.
Right.
This is the equidistant line that is created.
Mm.
Of course, you might need to do a little bit of editing, right, of the equidistant line if there's small islands or et cetera, et cetera.
Okay.
But this is the most basic way of creating of an equidistant line, right, a maritime boundary line. So this, yeah. So there you go. This is a maritime
All
boundary
right.
line and how you do it
Mm.
with QGIS.
Okay. Wow. Thank you very much. Even I learned a lot
Mhm.
from your presentation, David. Can you just stop the sharing?
Stop. All right.
All right.
There you go.
So once again, thank you very much. Okay. For those who are starting their thesis, they
Mhm.
might think that, okay, this is a bit technical. I haven't really mastered my QGs yet and things like that. So how was your situation when you studied your thesis? Like,
Mm.
do you consider yourself as an expert already, like advanced in?
Of course not. Of course not, Mandy. No,
Uh,
I also struggled a lot, right?
mm,
Uh, the main thing I struggled with first and foremost was the coordinates, right?
mm,
I struggled a little bit finding the coordinates I needed, but then when I found that website, the UN.org, where it has
mm,
everything, things got a lot easier. But the
right.
what was most troubling to me was definitely the operating the QGIS, right? The QGIS. Especially since I didn't have like this sort of stuff where there was someone teaching me straight from the beginning
Mm,
what to do. All I had was previous research, right? Previous research from seniors.
right,
Kak Mega was one of them,
right.
who also did this kind of research, and I had to piece together a lot of these
Mm,
methods from different theses, right? From senior, we had Kak Mega, we had uh, from a lot of different people, and then
right.
I had to consult my friends as well, who's also doing the
Mm,
same research with maritime implementation. I even consulted Febri once, which is also another docent
okay.
in Technique Geodesy, on what exactly I had to do if I want to do this in QGIS.
Mm,
So it takes a lot of effort, definitely,
right. All
but
right.
it's
But you did
once
it.
you piece together all of those different
Right.
things, it gets easier,
Mm,
definitely. Yeah.
okay. Right. So meaning that I just want to give a good news to everybody that it doesn't mean that when you want to do this thesis, you have to master that first.
Oh
I
no,
mean,
definitely not. Yeah.
but I think one good news is that we in Technique Geodesy UGM, we learn GIS, right, officially. So
Yeah.
that at least officially you have learned the QGs and other software. That at least it give you
Yeah.
at least a basic principles or
Yeah, the basic knowledge, basic principles. Yeah, we already knew. We already learned that. Yeah.
all right. Okay. Maybe one more, David.
Of course,
Tell
Mandy.
the viewers that we had a good experience when I asked you to join the training with the Petronas.
Oh, okay.
Tell us that experience and how your thesis definitely help you to basically take the advantage of that kind of experience.
Right.
Mm.
So is that a year ago, Andy?
A year ago, yeah, this
I
December.
think it was a year ago, right?
Yeah.
A few months ago. A few months
Okay.
ago,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Pa Andy invited me to join one of his workshops, basically training workshop, right? Where he had a few people from Petronas come over to Indonesia, to Yogyakarta specifically.
Right.
He conducted this training workshop, right? Where he taught them everything and anything there is to know about maritime boundaries, maritime
Mm,
delimitation, and UNCLOS, and everything regarding that topic. And
mm,
Andy was kind enough to invite me as well to become one of the teachers, I guess, or an assistant to Andy during that time, where he
mm.
asked me to basically do the exact same thing that I'm doing right now, right? To demonstrate, to tell about my thesis research,
Right.
demonstrate on exactly what I did, and thankfully, it was received very well by them,
Very well. Yes.
by Petronas people. It was very successful.
I'm sure
And
they
to
love you.
myself, apparently they loved me very much. And to me personally, right, it wasn't
Mm,
just a training workshop for them, but it was also a opportunity for me to further understand exactly about my research, right? Because when I was just doing it, I was just writing these random words on a piece of paper, right? When I was writing my research. But
Mm.
when I had the opportunity to say it out loud, to explain it to laymen's, actually, right? These Petronas
Right.
members were laymen's. They did not know anything about maritime boundaries. They did not know anything about maritime delimitation. And the fact that I had the opportunity to explain it to them, and the fact that they actually understood what I was saying, they were very interested in what I was saying, it
Yeah.
really gave me another perspective on what I studied as well. So I had greater understanding.
Right.
Yeah, just by teaching it, by explaining it to different people, it gave me a new perspective on what I was doing. I actually understood a lot more on what I was doing because I'll be honest, Andy, during my thesis when I was doing it, I kind of messed around a little bit. I was doing like half-heartedly, but after doing that, it really gave me an appreciation
All
for
right.
researching, for teaching, even yeah, as well.
Yeah, and I really enjoy your presentation at the time. I know that they also enjoyed it. They love you, and as you said, they really understood what you said. That's actually the most important thing.
Mm.
Okay, David. Now, last questions. What message do you have for students or your friends or your adik class who are now doing
And juniors,
this?
okay. Semangat aja teman-teman. Karena namanya skripsi itu semua orang pasti lewatin kan.
Hmm.
Everyone will go through the exact same thing as you are. Nanti there will be some points kalau kalian struggle, kalau
Hmm.
kalian bingung, kalian pusing gimana-mana. Dan itu normal ya. It's very normal to do that. Every single student yang goes to skripsi will go to the exact same thing as you. You're alone. Jadi ya, my biggest piece of advice itu ya jangan diem. Don't keep it to yourself. Ngobrol aja. It could be to Pak Andi as your dosen pembimbing, or maybe your other dosen pembimbing, kan mungkin ada murid yang bukan dosen pembimbing Pak Andi yang nonton ini juga gitu kan.
Hmm.
Dosen pembimbing lain, atau teman-teman kalian yang seperjuangan kalian nge-skripsi, ceritain aja juga bisa.
Hmm.
Ke cutting, ke junior kalian pun bisa juga. Atau kayak orang tua teman. Pokoknya, just don't keep it to yourself. Karena, again, as I said before, just talking about it to someone really, really helps regarding your topic. Gitu.
Right.
Even if mereka nggak ngerti sama sekali, mereka kayak denger-dengerin doang, mereka nggak ngerti, just by talking about it, it will give
Hmm.
you a new jalan baru lah. Gitu. Oh, mungkin ada something yang kalian nggak kepikiran. Oh, I could tackle this thing from here. Oh, I could talk about this instead of that. Oh, I could do this. So it's very enlightening by talking about it. So yeah, again, that's my biggest advice to yeah, don't keep it to yourself. Talk about someone. It'll make it
Yeah.
much easier that way.
All right. Great, David. Thank you so much. I also learned from you, and also learn. I need to keep learning about how to be a good supervisor. I think by talking to you, by
Mm.
your difficulties, I think that will also give me good reason to always learn and learn. All right. Thank you so much once again, and have.
You're welcome, Bandy.
All right. Bye bye, David. Thank you.
Goodbye.